All right, so you ready to jump into this whole data protection officer thing? DPO for short. Everyone loves a good acronym, right? We've got your RoleCatcher.com stuff right here, especially that career guide of theirs. And I get the sense this isn't just hypothetical for, yeah, you're seriously thinking about this path, huh?
Yeah.
So let's break down what makes this role so important now that data is, well, everything.
It's funny because it's not just about being like a tech genius or a legal eagle. It's the combo of those, sure, but then you toss in human behavior, and that's where things get really interesting.
RoleCatcher definitely picks up on that. They mentioned DPOs working across all these departments, legal, IT, HR, even staying ahead of the game on stuff like AI. That's a whole lot to handle. Is it really as demanding as it sounds?
Let me put it this way. When there's a data breach, the DPO is often the first one in the hot seat. They're investigating, trying to minimize the damage, and yeah, they might even have to answer to regulators. We're talking about protecting a company's rep, but bigger picture, people's trust.
So they're the ones trying to make sure companies don't end up on apology commercials saying, we take your privacy very seriously,
Right.
right? RoleCatcher mentions GDPR constantly. What even is that, and why is it such a big deal for DPOs?
GDPR stands for General Data Protection Regulation. Think of it like the gold standard for data protection. And here's the kicker. It's not just for European companies. If a company anywhere in the world is handling personal data from someone in the EU, they've got to be GDPR compliant.
Hold on. So even if a company's based in, say, I don't know, South America, but they've got European customers, GDPR still matters. That's a huge reach.
Exactly. That's why this role is becoming so important globally. A DPO needs to be fluent in GDPR because they're the ones guiding their organization on stuff like how data is collected, stored, processed, all while making sure people's rights aren't thrown out the window.
That's a whole other level of responsibility, especially with tech changing so fast. RoleCatcher really stressed that DPOs need to be strong communicators. Why is that so important if you're already a data protection whiz?
Because you can't just like lock data up and call it a day. You got to create a whole culture of data protection in the organization. That means explaining these really complex ideas to everyone, not just the techies.
It's like you said earlier, human behavior is key. RoleCatcher also mentioned the potential for stress in this role. Doesn't sound like it's all sunshine and roses, even if you're usually working in an office.
Well, think about it. You're dealing with legal stuff, tech that's always changing, and this constant possibility of a data breach. Oh, and you're responsible for protecting super sensitive info. Yeah, I can see how stress might creep in.
So we talked about certs that could give you a leg up, but what about actually doing the job? RoleCatcher breaks down those responsibilities for entry-level, junior, and senior DPOs, super helpful for anyone trying to figure out where they'd fit in.
It's cool how they show the progression because it's not like you just rack up years and that's it. An entry-level DPO might be assisting with those data protection impact assessments, but a senior DPO could be leading the whole thing, advising the entire organization on some really complex stuff. Talk about a jump in responsibility.
So no getting stuck in paperwork purgatory forever then. One thing I noticed, RoleCatcher uses some interesting words to describe these roles. Like, an entry-level DPO needs to be diligent and detail-oriented, while a junior DPO should be proactive and knowledgeable. It's almost like they're sketching out the ideal personality for each level.
It helps you see yourself on that path, right? Oh, and those alternate titles they mentioned. Apparently, you might see Information Governance Manager or Privacy Program Manager out in the wild, depending on the company.
Good to know, because that means your DPO skills could apply even if the job title isn't a perfect match. Seems like a very transferable skill set to have.
For sure. They even suggest DPOs could move into roles like Chief ICT Security Officer or Policy Manager down the line.
Makes sense when you think about those core abilities. Analyzing tricky situations, clear communication, advocating for ethical data practices. Those are useful anywhere, but especially with more and more industries relying on data these days.
They had that whole section, Functions and Core Abilities, and it wasn't all techie stuff either. They were talking about active listening, persuasion, social perceptiveness.
Just reinforces that you're dealing with humans, not just robots, right?
Yeah.
Like we said, that human behavior element is huge in data protection.
And the learning never stops. RoleCatcher's knowledge and learning section, they hammered that point home. DPOs got to be on top of new regulations, new technologies, new best practices constantly. They even suggest joining professional groups, going to conferences, subscribing to those industry magazines.
Lifelong learning, but in a
Oh.
good way. You're always on the cutting edge of what's happening in a field that changes by the minute. And RoleCatcher seems big on the networking side, too. providing ways to connect with potential employers or even future collaborators.
Yeah, they're not just about getting you hired, but helping you build that career once you're in. Those AI-powered tools for optimizing your CV and doing interview practice, brilliant, really.
Speaking of interviews, they've got this huge collection of potential DPO interview questions. Any of those stand out to you, like particularly insightful ones?
I like how they ditch the generic stuff and jump into real-world scenarios, ethical dilemmas, the good stuff. Like, have you ever dealt with a data breach? If so, tell us about your role in responding to it.
Ooh, that's a tough one. It's one thing to talk about breaches in theory, but actually handling one under pressure, completely different ballgame.
Exactly. And that question, it forces you to think on your feet. It's not just what you know, but showing you can solve problems, stay calm when things get crazy, and that commitment to ethical data handling, all essential for a DPO.
RoleCatcher really seems to hammer on those communication skills, even in their interview prep stuff.
Makes sense, right? They even have AI-powered video practice with feedback, helping you fine-tune how you come across, making sure you're confident and clear.
It's not enough to just know the lingo. You got to be able to explain it all to someone who doesn't.
100%. Now, switching gears a bit, let's talk about the actual knowledge base a DPO needs. RoleCatcher divides it into core knowledge and complementary knowledge, really emphasizing how broad this expertise needs to be.
So it's not just about memorizing GDPR like it's your favorite song.
Nope. It's bigger than that. Understanding information security, legal compliance, risk management, ethical considerations, the whole picture. It's this multifaceted role that needs both the tech side and the human side.
We've been mostly in the digital world so far, but RoleCatcher also touched on the actual work environment, usually in office, they say, but remote work or even travel might be involved depending on the organization.
Makes sense when you think about it. DPOs, they're often bridging the gap between different teams, so you got to be able to connect with people from all sorts of backgrounds and levels of tech savviness. Sometimes you just got to be there in person.
So it's not all just staring at a computer screen all day, every day.
Not at all. You could be explaining data protection to someone in IT one minute, and the next you're having a chat about data subject rights with someone from marketing and keeping it clear and concise.
It sounds like you need to be able to switch gears pretty quickly.
You got it. And it's not just the variety of people, it's the range of tasks too. Could be doing data protection impact assessments, reviewing those data protection policies, providing training, responding to data subject requests, investigating those potential breaches.
Right.
Never a dull moment.
No kidding. You need to be organized, that's for sure. Yeah. Able to juggle a million things at once. Makes sense why RoleCatcher mentioned the potential for stress in this role.
That's definitely a demanding field, no doubt. But for the right person. Someone passionate about data privacy, someone who enjoys a fast-paced, intellectually stimulating environment, it can be incredibly rewarding.
And let's not forget, according to RoleCatcher, it pays well too. They said the demand for skilled DPOs is going way up, and companies are ready to pay for the right people to navigate this whole complex landscape.
They're realizing that data protection isn't just about checking boxes for the regulators anymore. It's about their reputation, keeping that customer trust intact.
Speaking of expertise, we talked about professional organizations and those certifications earlier. RoleCatcher specifically mentioned IAPP, ISACA, and ISAE. What can you tell us about those?
Sure thing. IAPP, that's the International Association of Privacy Professionals. They're like the big leagues for privacy education and certification, global reach. ISACA, the Information Systems Audit and Control Association, they're all about IT governance, risk, cybersecurity. And then there's ICA, the International Compliance Association. As you might guess, they're the go-to for compliance across all sorts of sectors.
So joining one of those could be a good move for aspiring DPOs. Networking opportunities, staying current on industry trends.
Absolutely. It shows you're serious about your career, that you're committed to staying on the cutting edge of data privacy.
And what about those certifications we mentioned, CIPP, CIPM, CIPT? Are those must-haves to even get a DPO job?
Well, they might not be listed as required for every single position out there, but trust me, having those credentials on your resume, it's a game changer. Gives you a real edge in this competitive market.
Like a seal of approval from the experts saying, yep, this person knows their stuff.
Exactly. And each cert digs into a different aspect of data privacy, so you can pick and choose based on what you're into and where you want your career to go.
We talked about CIPP and CIPM, but what about CIPT? What's that one all about?
CIPT, that's Certified Information Privacy Technologist. This one's for the tech lovers out there. It's all about the technological side of data privacy. Privacy by design, data de-identification, privacy-preserving data analysis. If you're passionate about tech and privacy, this is the one.
Sounds like a good fit for someone who enjoys working with those data security tools, privacy-enhancing technologies, and compliance software.
You got it. Now, while those specific certs are definitely valuable, keep in mind the requirements can be different for each job and each company.
So even if a job ad doesn't specifically say, must have X certification, it's still smart to highlight any relevant ones you've got on your resume and during interviews, right?
Absolutely. It shows you're invested in your professional growth, that you take data privacy seriously.
And remember that cool RoleCatcher feature we discussed, where you can basically raise your hand and say, hey, employers, I'm here. That's got to be huge for getting noticed.
It's like having your own personal recruiter working behind the scenes, matching your profile with companies who need someone just like you.
That's awesome. Okay, let's shift gears a little bit and talk to the folks who are just dipping their toes into this whole data privacy world. What advice would you give someone who's intrigued but doesn't know where to start?
First things first, dive in. Read articles, check out blogs, maybe take some online courses, just get familiar with the basics, the lingo, the regulations.
So you don't need to be a lawyer to get started.
Not at all. A legal background can be helpful for sure. But lots of companies are looking for practical experience, tech skills, and a solid understanding of data protection. You don't need a law degree for that.
That's good to hear. Any other nuggets of wisdom for our aspiring DPOs out there?
Network, network, network. Go to industry events, connect with people on LinkedIn, join those online communities, put yourself out there, talk to people who are passionate about data privacy.
It's about making those connections, learning from the pros, right?
You got it. And don't underestimate the power of internships or even volunteer work.
Even if they don't pay.
Even then, practical experience is gold. It lets you actually use what you've learned, build new skills, and make those connections that could turn into a job down the road.
Get your foot in the door, shows how enthusiastic you are.
Exactly. And if you're already working in a related field like IT or compliance, don't forget to highlight those transferable skills.
So if you're in IT, you could emphasize your knowledge of data security and how it connects to data privacy.
Exactly. Connect the dots for potential employers. Show them how your current skills translate to the data privacy world.
RoleCatcher paints a pretty rosy picture overall, but they do mention the demands of the job, especially that potential for stress. What are some other challenges that aspiring DPOs should be ready for?
Well, this field moves fast. New regulations pop up, tech changes overnight, and the way companies use data is constantly evolving. You got to be comfortable with that.
So not a job for someone who likes things to stay the same then.
Not at all. DPOs need to be adaptable, comfortable with a little bit of uncertainty, always ready to learn something new.
What other challenges come to mind?
Sometimes you got to walk a tightrope between what the organization wants and what's best for the individual. DPOs often have to be the voice of data privacy and compliance, even when that means pushing back against other people in the company or questioning how things have always been done.
So you need a strong backbone. You got to be willing to stand up for what's right, even when it's hard.
Absolutely. It's about integrity, having a strong moral compass, being willing to speak up and be the voice of reason, even when it's the tough choice.
It sounds like a challenging path, but at the end of the day, incredibly rewarding for the right person. Someone who's truly passionate about data privacy.
Couldn't agree more. This field has so much potential, and as our world becomes more and more data-driven, the DPO role is only going to become more important.
We've covered a lot today, from the day-to-day of being a DPO to those must-have skills and knowledge. But before we wrap up, let's zoom out for a sec. We've talked about ethics and data protection, but what's that actually look like on the ground?
It's not just like ticking boxes and following the rules because you have to. It's about understanding why those rules exist in the first place, respecting people's rights, making sure data is handled responsibly every step of the way.
Remembering that data represents a real person with real concerns about how their information is being used.
Exactly. And the deeper you go into this data privacy world, the more you realize there's no one right answer when it comes to ethical data handling. Lots of different perspectives out there. Some folks, they're all about strict regulations, saying that's the only way to protect people. Others say, hold on, we need some flexibility to let innovation happen.
Yeah, it's complicated, that's for sure. No easy answers.
Exactly. And that's why you got to engage with those different viewpoints, really think critically about what people are saying, and then figure out where you stand. What does ethical data handling mean to you in this digital world?
Love that. It's not just about memorizing a rule book. It's about understanding the why behind those rules and forming your own informed opinion on how we should be treating data.
And that's what's going to make you stand out as a data privacy pro. Having that technical knowledge is great, but pair that with a strong ethical compass, and you're golden.
So for anyone listening who's thinking about a career in data protection, remember to look beyond the textbooks and the certifications. Really grapple with these ethical dilemmas. What kind of impact do you want to have as a guardian of data? How can you use your skills to make sure data is handled ethically, especially as our world relies on it more and more every day?
The future of data privacy isn't just about ones and zeros or complicated legal terms. It's about people. Making those conscious ethical choices that respect individuals while still allowing us to use the power of data for good.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better myself. And on that note, we're going to wrap up our deep dive into the world of data protection officers. Hope you learned a thing or two, and more importantly, that we've piqued your curiosity to keep exploring this ever-changing crucial field.